sitting forward or back. So
Forward or back? Forward or back?
Okay.
Hi, Lisbon.
Hello. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Thank you for the introduction. We're going to talk about the designer of the future. So I thought maybe an appropriate place to start is what young designers are looking at these days in terms of references, where they're coming from, what they're using to find them. Matthew, maybe you'd like to start?
Sure. I think in terms of reference, young designers from what I guess was a ripple a few years ago has turned into a kind of digital tsunami of information. The areas they can get information has exploded exponentially. So the possibility for them to research in completely different ways has changed. But I think we might all have an opinion on the quality of that research and what that does. So yeah, Henry, I'm not sure what you think about that.
Well, when I'm searching online and researching for my own shoots, I always question the taste that is coming back to me from search engines. It always seems quite basic. If just for an example, if you put in Britpop, you get like a Union Jack flag and you get kind of some basic images back. Whereas if you're looking through books or old magazines, it's kind of a bit unexpected what you might get.
yeah.
So I feel it kind of, when you're online, it kind of closes what you're looking at.
I think the dangerous thing is a lot of young people who use the internet for research and development when they're doing creative work, they assume that everything's on the internet. So when they search for certain reference points or they put in certain things into search engines or Pinterest or whatever tool that they're using, they assume that they're going to get everything and it's their taste level and their curation that's actually going to be the guiding force. But actually, so many of those platforms are already pre-curated and they'll guide you in a certain way, which may or may not be very good. So yeah.
Benjamin, what's the positive of researching online?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're considering a young designer, aged under the age of 25, they've been born in a world with ubiquitous internet and access to these digital channels, and having a relationship that we just couldn't understand as old geezers sitting here on the stage. So in a lot of ways, I think their behaviors and the kind of sources that they're finding, I think they can teach us a lot about the way that we can use digital sources like Pinterest and social media as a way of finding references. But what's quite interesting, talking to my co-founder Nancy Tilbury, there is also an interest in looking back to maybe some of the old techniques, looking at magazines, taking things out, and actually mixing them up in a way to create something it's a lot more of a hybrid approach to design.
And Henry, as a designer, how has online and social media changed your approach to design?
I wouldn't say that the online tsunami or the digital tsunami has changed my approach to design per se. I think it's changed the way in which we approach content generation. I think, you have to create content that is applicable and relevant for the right platform. So, I think some of the things that we're still seeing are big brands utilizing social platforms to promote campaign imagery and really high-end shoots and really created content, when really the best way to use those platforms is to create this sense of community and use a lot more user-generated content. Just actually showcasing your products through the eyes of your customers is such an amazing gift and a great marketing tool.
It must be helpful to speak directly to the customer.
Yeah, and if you use pictures that are shot by your customers, then you've cut out a massive lot of work in the middle, and you don't have to pay for it. So, win-win.
But Henry, does it not, seriously though, when you're thinking about the channels that are out there, changing the type of product because you're envisaging how it might be seen on a particular platform?
I mean, my brand as an individual example, is very bold, it's very bright, it's very print-led or embellishment-led. So as a brand that's showcased online a lot through online retail, we do jump off the page, we do stand out, and we are quite visually strong. So it's not changed the way in which I approach my design process, but I think that's maybe down to my DNA and my aesthetic. I think for certain brands, we were talking earlier about how Prada as an example of a brand that's very much about a more...
You need to touch it. You
yeah,
need to be
it's
in
more of
store.
a
It's about
subtle,
fabrics and
subdued
subtlety.
aesthetic, and it's very much about quality and cut and detailing, which you don't necessarily get when you're scrolling through an online store. So, you know, it works well for certain brands and it doesn't work well for others, but yeah, it hasn't changed my design process.
But your aesthetic suits on selling online.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we're really bad at merchandising. We're not very good at putting in a plain piece of clothing because it'll make the rail in the department store look better, which could be considered a weakness, but as an online proposition, it's definitely a strength.
Benjamin, if we're talking about stuff standing out on a page online, that's something that technology can pick up on.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, so we run a technology company that is interested in fashion. We launched a fashion brand called 2415, and it's actually got technology in the clothing. You know, so we designed it for a young consumer. They're known as Gen Z, so they're sub 25-year-olds. They make up 25% of the US population, so they're a big, serious consumer market. And we deliberately designed technology into the clothing to help add features to traditional apparel. So these clothes can light up, they can animate to music. So they're designed really for a social media generation. You know, we had a launch party, and these kids were wearing the products, and the thing that they wanted to do more than anything is share with their communities. Mm-hmm. So in a lot of ways, thinking about the young designer also comes with a thought about the new companies that are going to emerge in the space, run by these young designers, which are really have technology in their DNA. You know, in the way that they market their products, in the way that they research, and also in the way that they eventually sell.
It's something that they would come to expect, it's not like an added feature.
No, I mean, they look at the world. Imagine if you were born in a world with ubiquitous internet. Like, it's impossible for us to even start to imagine. You know, so they're looking at the world thinking everything needs to be smart, should be connected. Yeah. And it's this digital tsunami that Matt talks about is going to change everything. It's already changed the music industry. It's already changed video. And fashion is the next big industry, in my opinion. And
it kind of fundamentally changes the way that you learn to design, because in order to build what Ben's talking about Ben comes from an engineering background, so traditional designers are not going to have that skill set. And as we look towards the future, and what we're trying to do at London College of Fashion is look at how we can sort of get those hybrid skills of coding and engineering, which sit quite a long way away from traditional fashion design, and just bring it a little bit closer. We just had David from Bolt Threads talking about spider silk. You know, there's also that, away from electronics, the bioengineering side, which is going to form a new material and new ways for designers to use that material. And we need to start closing the gaps between fashion technology and bioengineering.
Mm-hmm. So at the moment you're experimenting with aesthetics and how you're using technology to make it look, but how do you make that functional as well?
So I think that's another question, because you look at what Ben is doing and suddenly it's adding a layer of functionality to clothing. As we were saying earlier, no one looks at your sweatshirt and say, "Hey Max, I love your sweatshirt. What does it do?" Mm-hmm. That's just not something that we're used to having that kind of interaction. And as we begin to use technology and embed electronics into garments, it will allow for an element of functionality that designers will have to begin to consider.
Mm. I think if you're over the age of 20, I'm really coming down hard on people over the age of 25, aren't I? But if you're over the age of 25, then we have a very linear approach to new technology. So new technology comes in, we have to work out how it fits into our everyday lives, you know, and then eventually it does. And you think about wearable technology, that's how wearable technology was focused in on health and fitness, because that's something that we are interested in, and also technology enablers like cheap accelerometers. However, as a young designer, a young consumer, new technologies are just there. They're there, and they understand them and they appreciate them. I mean, if you look at Snapchat, you look at social media as a prototype for what will happen in hardware and in the things that we buy. New ideas like Musical.ly, Snapchat, they are platforms that have kind of maybe odd functionality to us, but to a young consumer, they just take that, and it's about that functionality. It's about the feature set. So if clothing can have the same thing, So you're looking at the t-shirt and you're looking at the cut, the material, and also the resolution. Not thinking about the technology as a discrete part of that piece of apparel, but just a feature. Then it completely changes the way that you look at the fashion industry.
I think for me as well, the thing with fashion and tech is it has to create added value rather than just technology for the sake of it. And I think that a lot of the things that you've been working on, the added value is about creating that moment, that shareable moment. A puffer jacket that lights up, everybody wants to be the first one to wear that, to share that, and that's enough of an added value to that garment. I think trying to add too many things sometimes can take things away from people's sort of concept, but then I'm over 25, so.
It's okay.
I'm probably.
Are you?
Yeah.
Okay. Tough.
Just a bit.
So coming from ID Magazine, we have lots of research about what millennials want to buy, what their vision of luxury means, and always it comes back to they want to see sustainability and eco-friendly products. How is that something that all brands consider? Is that something that you already know about? How are you bringing that into your own work?
Well, I think that's the revolution that we're in at the moment. I mean, in terms of technical revolutions in fashion design, I'd say one of the previous biggest ones was the introduction of digital print in fashion, the way that kind of blew open the way that we could develop fabrics in a different way. And now I think it's the ethical revolution, and everybody's looking at their carbon footprint and what this industry is actually doing to the world. And I think it's very much a story that resonates really well with the consumer. And as soon as something resonates with the consumer, then the fashion industry take notice. But I think it's definitely at the forefront of everyone's mind in the industry. And I think it's at the forefront of every customer's mind. But I would challenge all of those millennials to pay an extra 20 quid to what they just bought to make it an ethical choice.
Yeah.
And I think that's always going to be the challenge from a business and a brand perspective is are you adding enough value that you can increase your price to accommodate the more ethical choice?
I think there's also a thing about a piece about credibility. So as a brand, I think now more than ever, it's really important to be upfront with your consumers, and for that to be part of the brand story. Because the kind of democratization of marketing in a way, where previously, we had these kind of central points of reference. We'd look towards an advertising campaign and we'd be brought into a brand that way. Now social media has seen the rise of the influencer, and we were talking backstage about the micro-influencer. And they really rely on that credibility piece, So a brand needs to make sure that it's super open about things like sustainability.
Yeah, at London College of Fashion next year, our Centre for Sustainable Fashion celebrates its 15th anniversary. So I think we have some history in seeing that develop, and it's interesting as the students that we work with now. It's just second nature. That is part of that process. It's not even a separation between this is an ethical choice or not. That is their starting point. And that eventually is going to start to feed through into the kinds of products that they're designing and experiences they build for consumers.
And in a business sense as well, it must be quite cost effective. The Nike announced a fly leather trainer a couple of months ago, and that is 80% recycled from what they've already made.
Well, I think you'll see an entire shift in the type of models in that manufacturing process, and Adidas have been well known in their speed factory and using robotics to bring manufacturing much closer to market, which means that we can begin to look at designing product and creating product that consumers actually want, that is designed by them. And one of the things we're interested in is, when you do that, if you could go into a retail store and begin to have more control over what you create and what you design, does that have more value? Can you add value in that way? And will consumers value what they make if they have a bigger input in creating it? I'm not sure what that does to a designer's role within that and how they begin to sit, but I think it's an interesting question.
Okay. And what about the shift recently in the way designers speak to their consumers? We've seen a move away from collections, seasonal collections, to seasonal drops. how does that affect a business?
Well, I think it's driven by the consumer, like most things in the industry, more and more so now because they have more of a voice thanks to the internet. But I think the issue, the difference between drops and collections is all about narrative, and it's all about telling that story, and that's something that kind of is something that brands want to do. They want to entice people into this narrative and bring them into their story, when really there's an argument that the customer just wants the product, you know, and the narrative part is secondary to that consumer. So I think there's so many like shifts happening in the industry across the board between like how we present collections, how we deliver collections, on what timetable, and on whose, you know, to whose specification and to whose needs. So it just means that there's no world order anymore. There's no right and wrong way of doing anything, and it just sort of blows the world open in terms of all the possibilities for what you can do. I think.
Yeah, I was just going to say, what even is a collection anymore? What is the need for that? When you look at the platforms, when you're selling a particular product, is it designing a product simply to sit on a particular page in order to hit a particular consumer?
Well, all the fastest growing brands at the moment are all single product brands. So like they'll just have one product. People go to them for that product. They know what they're going for, you know, whether it's shirts or footwear or handbags. You know, there's less and less growth in terms of full lines and full brands being born out there, just because I think, you know, it's harder to tell that story, and there's so much out there and so much information being thrown at the consumer every day that you need to find something to cut through. And so it's so much easier to do that if you can sort of focus their attention on one product category.
I've been interested recently in the shift in what is commercial. When I first started going to the shows about 5 or 6 years ago, I'd go to Milan and I'd see a collection of suits, and everyone would complain about how commercial that seemed. But now, when you look at what's been selling in the last couple of quarters, you have things like Balenciaga, Vetements, Off-White, complete opposite to what you used to see.
Yeah.
What's changed that? What's caused that?
Side of that? You take it?
I think it's just a change that runs through, you know, a lot of industries. But you know, I think this idea that fashion has to change. Now, the business model of fashion has changed dramatically. You know, streetwear is a great example, a place to look at how this has happened. You know, even 10 years ago, if you're a new fashion brand and you went through this, right, you have to put on a show, you sell to the buyers, and the risk is on you as a business. Now it's fine. In fact, you know, as a brand, to do a pre-order, to communicate clearly with your customer that you are giving them the opportunity to be the first to have this product, but they, you know, in return they have to be patient. It's completely changed.
Exclusivity is a really important thing. People are willing to queue.
Exactly, and that's the trade. You know, you offer exclusivity in return for allowing businesses to distribute in a slightly different way.
But I think that's also social media. It's being able to find a niche and a group that can influence a brand. You know, those walls that separated Fashion Week in the past have been smashed away. And I don't see that changing. I see that increasing dramatically. I think people's and consumers' ability to change what brands are making is bigger than ever.
I think that's a good point to end on. Consumers lead what we should design.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thanks very much, guys.
Cheers.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.